Elijah stirred the simmering tomato bisque one last time, adjusted the votive candles lining the kitchen counter, and exhaled. Tonight was supposed to be simpler toast to the next chapter. The civil ceremony was 2 weeks away. Tessa was upstairs, changing, humming to herself like nothing in the world had ever hurt her. They'd picked out the music earlier that day. Nothing too slow, she'd said, grinning as she swayed beside him in the car. Her lightness had always been magnetic. He loved that about her. She came downstairs barefoot, curls damp from the shower, and plopped into the chair across from him. "You're trying to make me fat before the wedding," she teased, scooping bread into the soup. He smiled. "It's called nourishment." They clinked glasses, talked about florals, guest lists, how awkward her cousin Amelia was. Then dessert, dark chocolate tart and red wine. That's when she said it. "Oh, and one thing I think I'll keep Matt's last name," she said, reaching for her wine. "It just sounds more elegant than Johnson. Like, aesthetically. No offense." Elijah blinked. "No offense," she'd said. The words didn't register all at once. They floated in the air like dust motes, slowly settling into the crevices of his chest. He took a slow sip. "You're serious?" She shrugged. "It's just a name, babe. I mean, we don't have to be traditional, right?" He nodded once, said nothing else. She moved on talking about the honeymoon. But Elijah's mind had already left the room. He thought of his great-grandfather, who'd signed his name with an X because learning to read would have cost him fingers. Thought of his father, a postal worker who reminded Elijah every Sunday, "Boy, you wear that name right. They gave it to us. We made it ours. And now it was just not elegant enough." Tessa laughed at something on her phone. Elijah watched her. Across from him sat someone who loved him, but not the parts of him shaped by survival, struggle, skin. He smiled, barely, cleared the table. Didn't bring it up again. But something small, something sacred, had cracked, and cracks he knew never stay small for long. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, Elijah shaved carefully, ironed his collar flat, and chose the watch his father gave him when he landed his first job. He and Tessa were having brunch with her parents in the garden patio of their Westchester estate. "Relax," she said, squeezing his hand in the Uber. "They love you." Elijah smiled, but his mind echoed with last night's silencer. Words brushing off the weight of his name like lint dot, at the long table shaded by parasols and summer trees. Her father poured mimosas while her mother introduced him loudly to the couple beside them. "This is Elijah. Brilliant designer. Self-made. Tessa's lucky, really. From the city, right?" The man asked. "Brooklyn, Queens," Elijah said, trying to keep it light. "Oh, of course. I just meant you know. You're very ... articulate." The woman smiled as if offering praise. He nodded politely, chewed his fruit. Tessa twirled her hair, eyes on her croissant. Later, her uncle leaned in and said, "You know, we admire people like you pulling yourselves up. Real grit. Not many from your kind of background do what you've done." Elijah blinked. "What kind of background is that?" The man chuckled, waving his hand. "Oh, you know, urban grit. Tessa's got a strong spirit too, clearly." The table laughed. Elijah did not. He looked at Tessa, waiting for anything. A glance, a wince, a word. But she was buttering a scone like the conversation hadn't happened. Afterward, in the car, the silence roared. He stared out the window, Finally, you heard what they said. Tessa sighed. Elijah, they're old. They didn't mean it like that. They said I was articulate, lucky, from my kind of background. Right, but it's brunch. It's not the time for a debate. He turned to her. Is there ever a time? Her jaw tensed. I just didn't want to make it a thing. He didn't respond, just nodded slowly. At home, Elijah went into his studio and opened a blank canvas. The silence between them deepened not from absence of sound, but from a failure to be seen. And in that stillness, a new thought formed. If she won't stand beside me in small moments, what will she do when it truly matters? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The portfolio review had gone well at least. That's what Elijah was told. Impressive range, sharp instincts. The recruiter had smiled. He'd left the sleek glass building that day, feeling for a moment like he'd finally be seen for what he could build, not where he came from. But the email arrived 2 days later. Thank you for your time. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. He scrolled through Instagram that afternoon and saw Brian Langston, a former classmate who once asked Elijah if Afrofuturism was a Marvel thing, had been hired. Same role, same agency. Brian's caption read, "Thrilled to join a team. That really gets my creative voice." Elijah's stomach dropped. He called the recruiter. Calm, respectful. "Could I ask for feedback?" The voice on the other end softened. "Of course. Look, Elijah, your work is excellent. We just felt Brian was more aligned with our aesthetic. Just a better cultural fit, aesthetic." Elijah asked. The voice faltered. "You know, tone, background, synergy, things you can't always see on paper." He hung up quietly. That night, Elijah entered the apartment and found Tessa hunched over a mood board, tapping through wedding palettes. "I think champagne and ivory. Or is that too safe?" "I didn't get the job," he said, setting his bag down. She glanced up. "Oh, I'm sorry, babe. Their loss. That's it." "What do you want me to say?" she asked, her tone already fraying. He hesitated. "They said I wasn't the right cultural fit." Tessa frowned. "Maybe they meant vibe, not trace." Elijah studied her. "Would you have said that if I were white?" She stood, busying herself with fabric swatches. "I'm just trying to plan a wedding, Elijah. Not everything's a social statement." And there it was, again that invisible wall between their worlds. He went to his studio, closed the door, and stared at his own reflection in the dark monitor. Wasn't just tired, he was being chipped away, piece by silent piece. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Days passed in fragments. Elijah barely spoke. The air between him and Tessa thickened, every laugh forced, every touch brief. One night, while folding thank you cards at the kitchen table, he finally said it. "You still planning to keep Matt's last name?" Tessa didn't look up. "Why are we back on this again?" "Because it matters," Elijah said, voice steady. "You said it sounded more elegant. You didn't even think about what that meant to me." "It's just a name," she replied. "You're being dramatic." He stared at her, stunned. "Dramatic?" He echoed, slowly rising. "You think wanting to be seen for who I am is dramatic? You always make everything about race," she snapped. This was supposed to be a happy time. Elijah grabbed his keys without another word. The slam of the door echoed down the hallway. He drove on instinct, ending up at his mother's house in St. Albans. She opened the door in her robe, eyes tired but welcoming. In the living room, old jazz records played low. She poured him tea and sat beside him on the worn couch. She said my name wasn't elegant enough. Elijah whispered. His mother didn't flinch. She stood, disappeared briefly, and returned with a photo album. Yellowed pages, faded ink. That name fed us. Elijah. Carried us. Your grandfather picked it when they let him choose, after sharecropping. Said it sounded strong. Elijah ran, his fingers over the photo of a man standing tall in front of a church. It is strong, he said. His mother smiled. Then don't let anyone shrink it. He stayed the night, surrounded by history photos, Bibles, funeral programs, and in that quiet, something painful gave way not to peace, but to clarity. Elijah returned to the apartment the next morning. The light in the living room was soft, hesitant. Tessa sat on the couch, mascara smudged, a mug of cold tea in her hands. I didn't sleep, she whispered. He nodded. Neither did he. Days passed. The wedding plans resumed, but without rhythm. They moved like actors reciting lines from a play neither believed in anymore. The following Saturday, they met with Reverend Wallace, a poised woman with silver braids and warm eyes. Her chapel office was neat, sterile soft beige walls, dried eucalyptus, and silence too clean to trust. She smiled. Let's talk about vows and the question of names. Elijah spoke first. I'll be keeping my Johnson. The Reverend nodded. Tessa hesitated, shifting in her chair. I'm keeping mine too well, Matt. Legally, I've built a lot around it. Silence. Elijah turned his head slowly toward her. There was no shock left, only confirmation. Reverend Wallace didn't raise her brow or blink in judgment. She folded her hands and said, gently, names matter, especially when history has tried to erase them. The words hovered in the air, like incense sweet painful, undeniable. Tessa looked away. The Reverend continued, her voice soft. They're not just letters. They're lineage, resistance, identity. Elijah said nothing. He didn't need to. Outside, the sun filtered through stained glass, casting fractured reds and blues across their faces. Tessa's jaw was set, her eyes fixed on the floor, and in that sterile room, something became undeniable. Love without understanding was a brittle thing. After the meeting, they walked to the car in silence. Elijah opened her door, then paused. His hand rested on the frame as she climbed in. He looked at her and quietly understood he was already letting go. Asterisk, 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 the ring sat quietly on the nightstand, catching morning light like it hadn't meant something once. Elijah didn't leave in a blaze. No slammed doors, no final scream, just a quiet morning, a packed duffel, and a note on the counter that read, I can't lose myself to be loved by someone who won't see me. Tessa never replied. Not that he expected her to. A week passed, then another. Elijah moved back into his childhood apartment over his mother's bakery. The space was small but familiar walls that echoed with memory, not doubt. At night, he wrote a letter to Tessa, not a plea, not a threat, just truth. You loved the way I looked on your arm, but never asked what weighed on mine. You called it just a name, but that name survived whips, ownership, silence. You shrugged when I needed you to speak. Your indifference hurt more than hatred ever could. He folded it once, slid it into a drawer, and never sent it. Instead, he poured his pain into purpose. He rebranded his design studio, Lineage and Form, a fusion of ancestral symbolism and modern art. Clients came slowly at first, then steadily. He hosted free workshops for black teens, creating space for art that spoke of history, pain, brilliance. He laughed more, slept better, ate with his mother every Thursday. Months later, he curated an exhibit titled Our Names, Our Stories. It opened in a Harlem gallery packed with community voices, students, elders. Each piece bore the name of its creator, carved, stitched, or painted in bold. Elijah stood beside his mother as guests moved through the space. She looked up at him, proud and tearful. "You found your place again," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "I never really lost it." A young woman approached, notebook in hand. "Mr. Johnson, do you mentor? I want to do work that means something." He smiled. "Yes, that's exactly the kind of work we do." As the crowd buzzed around him, Elijah stood tall, not as someone abandoned, but as someone rebuilt. Asterisk, asterisk, the auditorium smelled faintly of sawdust and fresh paint-scent renovations. Rows of folding chairs creaked under the weight of students, artists, professors. On stage, under soft amber lights, Elijah sat between two scholars on a panel titled Art as Resistance, naming ourselves, framing our truths. He wore a black blazer over a white tee that simply read Johnson. The moderator turned to him. "Elijah, your exhibit struck a deep chord. Can you speak about what led you here?" He leaned toward the mic, fingers clasped loosely. "I used to think love could survive ignorance," he said, voice measured. "But sometimes, walking away is what teaches others to finally listen." The room went still. I had to choose between being accepted, and being whole. I chose wholeness. And I found my name was never the burden I just needed to carry it for myself. Scattered applause grew into something fuller. Some nodded, others wiped their eyes. After the event, Elijah stepped into the lobby where canvases from our names, our stories hung on temporary walls. One featured his great-grandfather's name, etched beneath a painted silhouette of his backscard. Upright, enduring. People milled about, exchanging reflections. A teenage girl approached, clutching a sketchpad. "Mr. Johnson," she asked. He smiled. "Yes. I saw your exhibit. I didn't know you could tell stories like that. My name's Aaliyah. I want to make work that means something too." He nodded, his voice warm. "Then you already know the most important part. Let's talk." They walked toward the exit slowly, voices low, surrounded by color and history. Outside, the city pulsed. Buses groaned, streetlights hummed. But Elijah felt something inside him finally quiet. Not silence like before, but peace. A name, he thought, is not something to change to be loved. It's something you love enough to never change.